This is a full book summary of Jared Diamond's Guns, Germs, and Steel. Note that this will become a little bit more relevant in the 2020s, if you remember the 2020s or are old enough to remember the 2020s, that is. Anyone will be watching then? Who knows? They might see this as an archaeological artifact that they can use to analyze the past and what a student would be thinking of. But then again, I am dreaming a little too much. Would YouTube still exist then? Let's just do the full book summary. Guns, Germs, and Steel. For Jared Diamond, this was very hard to write about, certainly. Trying to compress, mentioned 13,000 years of history into 400-ish pages. It's incredible. For historians, that might be a little too oversimplified, mainly because each page will be around 150 years for each continent. Each continent, I said each continent. Whereas for Yali, the one who asked the question of why do you Europeans have so much more cargo than us New Guineans or white people? I'm not gonna say white or black as much as in this episode, mainly because I am scared of being censored. This itself is a controversial book, so this is just a summary. I will talk about my opinions and reviews on it in the next episode. Regardless, back to this summary. Here we have our little short history, and for Yali, this might be a little bit more complicated than he wanted. Historians, this will be a little too oversimplified for their liking. They probably want like a 1,000-page kind of essay or something like that. But Jared Diamond wants this to be known by the common man, to be understood by the common man. As a result, he wants to go ahead and create everything in a world where that it's just not just racial logic, like what the people used to think of, like white people superior to black people, but no, not like that. In fact, he creates counter arguments towards that, thinking of it in a geographical, logical, and environmental kind of sensible way. It sends evolution, but without the races inside. Just take away the skin color. Everyone inside, they're the same color. Your heart, they're the same color. Your veins, hopefully, they're the same color. And if they're not, well, then that means there's something really wrong with you and you need to go see a doctor. Was that a controversial claim? And regardless, here, for Guns, Germs, and Steel, it pretty much sums up the entirety of the reasons of why the Europeans dominated world history, and still kind of dominates us up. The Asians are starting to catch up. 3 simple things: guns, germs, and steel. Technically, guns and steel can be grouped into one, but hey, with guns and metal steel swords are not the same thing. So I'm gonna talk about each one a little bit more closely. I don't know. You don't need to ask me about Yali. You can just read the book for more information, or watch the documentary adaptation series. That's a pretty good book. But let's talk about Guns and Steel first. Now remember that everyone was at one point, at least, in the Neolithic Stone Age. Some people are still in the Neolithic Stone Age. But then certain groups in certain places started to become a little bit more advanced, mainly because of their location and their placements. The Tigris and the Euphrates gave birth towards the Fertile Crescent. The Nile River itself gave birth towards the Egyptian river, to the civilization of Egypt. The Ganges River itself gave birth towards the Indian civilization, the Indus Valley civilization, and the Yellow River, which I will draw in yellow because it's yellow, gave birth towards the Chinese civilization. All these have 2 things in common: rivers, which is a source of irrigation, and grains. And let me also remind you that they are all on similar latitudes. If this is a world map, I have to say that all of these civilizations that I just mentioned, they all happened in this area. Let me just draw India, Korea, a little bit over here, or here, some of these islands, craggy stuff, and all those civilizations happened in these places. India. It's not that far away. It's right here in this similar location. You should also mention that they have similar latitudes and they have similar latitudes and they're like in the similar places. Whereas all the other civilizations in the world, they're more or less like, hey, this is just going to work. This is just going to probably going to happen in a way. But regardless, these are the ones that spawned these 4 types of irrigations and agricultures first. Also note that agriculture is very, very hard to go ahead and spread along longitude, whereas latitude, your lines, they're pretty easy because they have similar climates. Climates change as you go up, and climates change as you go down as well too. But climate relatively stays the same whenever you go left and right. In case of left and right, I mean like going from east to west, not north to south. And with that and domestication of animals, we were able to finally get the steels, or at least for this civilization, they were able to get the steel. Whereas what happened to the rest of the civilizations? Well, here's the thing: out of like the 100 or so kind of candidates for domestication of animals, only about 14 or 15 of them were able to be domesticated, them including the chicken, oh god, them including the chicken, the pig, the cow, and the llama. Whereas all those civilizations, like 13 of those 14, were like all in Eurasia, only one of them was ever found in America. Hence why America is still kind of advanced compared to like the Africans or the Australians, so not saying that they are more advanced, but in the sense of like they had some sort of superior domesticated animals. Their only means of transportation, because horses didn't exist there, was the llama. And the llama can't pull stuff like a bison or an ox or a cow, so there's that. They had to work that out, but they were forced to become hunter-gatherers temporarily, mainly because of the fact that they cannot completely rely on agriculture for their food. I mean, you don't just like wait around months for your food to grow. You like survive on past grains and hunting, gathering meat and berries you find in the wild. So that's the steel part. And the Europeans eventually created the guns out of their own scientific brilliances, and this fact that guns became superior than crossbows, so it was a necessity in warfare because of all the opposing factions in Europe. We have to finally talk about germs. Germs themselves have become a little more relevant recently, but I'm not going to talk about COVID-19. Right now, I'm just going to talk about germs that wiped out human history. For the germs themselves, they go ahead and had several biological warfare. Germs themselves, in like the case of viruses or smallpox or something like that kind of stuff. That's the kind of stuff that you really, really want to see. That's the kind of stuff that you will win you the trump card, because if the enemy does not have immunity toward germs that you have, well, you can just go ahead and unleash that biological weapon towards the enemy, which is what the European conquistadors did to the Native Americans when they first originally tried to conquer the Native Americans. They sent Native Americans blankets that were all full of smallpox infections, and as a result, the Native American populations withered down by 95% even before the Europeans arrived at camp. Like the entire army force. One downside is people after that kind of died, including the people who released that biological weapon, the Germans. And because of these three reasons and the geographies that went ahead and created all these, you have to have guns, germs, and steels to win your opponents. Your germ immunities come from zoonotic, aka diseases that come from animals that turn into human kind of diseases that go ahead and build immunity. So that means more domestic animals equals more immunity. You can't really see with this ratio the 13-to-1 difference. This is why the Europeans won in that battle. For guns, well, let's just say that Native Americans had 0 guns. Sure, they had some kind of steel, but in that sense, it was barely weapons at all. In fact, they still used stone tools. So yeah, for guns, the Europeans win as well too. And steel, I just mentioned it, that pretty much Native Americans were still stuck in the past material wise, and the Europeans were so far ahead that steel itself, this is also going to be part for the Europeans. So Europeans won all 3 of them, and they had a great climate for agriculture as well as hunter gathering without the necessity of going ahead and creating like agricultural societies where they had to like live there forever and ever to tend the crops. Some people did that, but I believe it's kind of simpler to just do guns, germs, and steels and conquer other people, because well, conquering other people seemed to be a bit more achievable it is now than like before. Before everything, the closest thing we had to like email was a man with a mail going ahead and running along a horse. But with that sense, we finally get to have the question towards Yali's. We finally have the answer towards Yali's question. Why are the Europeans have much more cargo, or aka livestock and good material goods, when the New Guineans themselves have very little of it? It's because of the guns, germs, and steels and where the Europeans were born. Because of their location of where they were born, they were able to get into higher places, and they were able to go ahead and achieve higher things. A great place to have agriculture will go ahead and give you achievement. A bad place to have agriculture, like say the Arctic, so why you're born in the Arctic, do not ask me. It's beyond me. Like that. No, that doesn't work. It's a short history of everybody, so you can't go ahead and try to compress literally everyone into this book. But it is a short history of how everyone became a part of this world. Arguably, if you're going to blame someone who goes ahead and becomes the blame it all for all this, then you have to blame the first monkey who climbed down the tree to walk on like 2 legs, bipedal style. Culture itself also has a pretty big role too. As I mentioned before in the previous episode about China, China's one downside of its unitary government was the fact that if one person decided not to adopt something that could have been useful, they couldn't adopt it until like everyone else was adopting it and found it pretty useful. And that's about it. That's the full book summary of Guns, Germs, and Steel. I hope you guys enjoyed this episode of Han Chen Chan. I hope to see you guys soon. Ace those 8 book reports. And until then, Shihan out peace. Bye bye.